I'm Albert Cervera from Nantic, and I'm going to make this strange presentation. I used to excel, but now I shine. Many of us, there's a fact that Excel or spreadsheets in general, I'm going to focus on Excel, but in general it works for spreadsheets. There's the general belief that when a company is mostly managed by using Excel, it has a problem. And this is not something that consultants only do or say, but we also see companies that have the same belief. They come to Nantic and say, well, we are managing everything with Excel and we are worried because something wrong is going to happen soon. And we started to think, why was that, okay? Oops. Okay, so it starts great, but many companies end up hating it. And we started to think why that was the case, okay? Of course, we did the same. When somebody came and said that the company was managed using Excel, we said, oh, you've got a problem. But why is that? Why is there a problem if you manage your company with Excel? Because in many cases, it's difficult to replace. People have some habits of modifying the Excel, its structure, and you start to think, okay, I'm going to put them something that is not as flexible as Excel, so I have to think twice of making this kind of change, okay? So we took the time to analyze what were the problems of Excel for companies, why at some point it was making things worse, and I'm going to tell you what we found out. I'm going to spoil you a little bit the end of the story, because we are going to present not only the analysis, but the solution we found for it. And of course, it's going to be great. So I'm going to tell you what 3 of our customers said when we presented a prototype of it. So you will stay in the chair till the end. One of them said, this tool is going to solve many needs of our company, which, well, you say, okay, it was an experiment, so it's working, seems it works. The other one said, how much is it? Which is even more interesting than the first one. And the third one was, do you need money to finance that development? Which is even better because you don't have to finish it before you get the money. So it was a good result. So you will have to wait a little bit for what you're going to love until today, from today, sorry. So some of the things we found were, I divided the items in 3 areas. The first one is data consistency, okay? Data is very easy to introduce in Excel, but that also makes it makes people afraid when the number of data grows, or even if it doesn't grow, they are afraid of anybody modifying data. That's especially worse when you have many users, of course, okay? The other one is related to the first one. You have several formulas in there. The spreadsheet is growing all the time, and it starts to be difficult to be sure that the formula a computation has all the data in it. The typical case, you have a sum of some cells, and is that sum using all the cells that I need? Okay, and when the Excel starts to grow, and you have several formulas in many cases. I was trying to wake up the audience. Okay, so you start to have several formulas in several columns, and you are not sure that all the columns are okay. And because the company is growing, you're making lots of decisions out of that data, and maybe you are making purchases or large purchases based on those magic computations. So people start to be afraid about it. Okay. Data is easy to modify, although Excel has some features for locking cells, but nobody's using it most of the time. Okay. Another point is scalability. I've mentioned it before a little bit, but you start with a small spreadsheet where you put kind of a table on the right, you put some configuration parameters at the top left corner, maybe with the number of employees, which affects in some formulas, etc. But at some point, what was great, because everything fit in the screen, you start to need several sheets. And then you have sheets and formulas from one sheet pointing to the other one, and things start to not be so beautiful as in the beginning, okay? It gets even worse when you need to link between documents, okay? Excel allows you to link information from other documents, and users start to believe that something's going to happen, and it's very bad. And even worse when you need to share those documents between users. You need a shared drive or something like that. Of course, you've got Google Drive and these kind of tools, but still people are using Excel, etc. You see the chaos about to happen. And then there's other users of Excel, which is accessing data of the ERP or from other systems. Okay? Then you have ODBC. You can connect to the database, but it's complex. Users need to know SQL. Sharing it with other users is also complicated because you have one spreadsheet in your machine that is working great, but you need another user to access it. You need to configure ODBC connection in that other PC. If the PC is broken, you need to install it again. It's everything. That's the reasons why people start to be very afraid about their decision system, which end up being a set of Excel documents. Another solution for this data analysis is exporting data each time, okay? But it's very impractical. People want things in real time. Maybe you have to move columns. It depends on how you export data. It's not going to be so easy. And in some cases, you would want to enrich data, not only analyze, but add some information to data coming from your system. In this case, Tryton, probably, okay? So these are more or less the problems. And the thing is, how do we solve that? I don't know if anybody wants to add something else that they find that Excel is a problem, something maybe I missed. It's this one, data analysis and enrichment.
Yeah. Is it only the time with the mistakes you do? It's just crazy.
Okay, so let's see how we solved it. Oops, not yet. Okay, what you're going to see here, it's of course the demo. It's work in progress, so you can expect some crashes. It's a good sign. It's because we are working on it. So you guess that it all starts in Tryton. So the solution we built works on Tryton. It's a Tryton module using standard Tryton features. because I like Risk, I didn't even install it. So you will have something to talk about tonight. For example, how my shadow prevented me to present to you Shine. Okay. Okay. So we've got a new menu here. Let me set up some configuration parameter. Going to talk about it later, if I remember. So the first thing we did is create this Shine thing, of course, because we used to Excel, but now we Shine, which is much better, of course. And we use the same terminology, wherever possible, with Excel. So we have a section named Sheets. The first difference with Excel is that I'm going to create a sheet here, test one, okay, and yes, another one. Sheets are all shared, because this is Tryton, and they are all on the same level. See the difference with Excel, in which you have several documents, in which you can have as many sheets as you want, but it's impractical also to have many sheets. And at the same time, as I said, you have several documents, and sharing sheets between documents starts to be a mess. Okay? So by bringing them to the same level, we avoid the problem of documents. We also avoid the problem of sharing, because we are using Tryton, so all users are using Tryton already. Okay? To manage them, we created something as simple as tags. So I can classify and logistics. I could classify those sheets on their own categories. Okay, so I can have several tags and I can have everything classified. So with this, we are building a system in which we have as many. Any questions? No? If you have any questions, don't hesitate to interrupt. Eh? In which we can have many sheets and search them easily. Everyone knows how to search on Tryton already, and classifying them using tags. Okay? Okay, let's see what a sheet brings us. The first thing we will note is that we've got a name and we've got an alias. An alias, once I modify the name, the alias is kept. So any formula that is already using this alias has not to be updated. Okay? That it stays consistent. The alias, if I put an, let's not, okay? If I put some accents, okay, it will remove them. Next thing we find, apart from the alias, is the type. What we found is one of the advantages of Excel is also one of its problems. The fact that I have many cells, I can put data that is structured differently in the same sheet. Okay? But in fact, we detected that there are 4 use cases for data in Excel. One of them is a table which grows vertically. Okay? I have a set of columns, and we keep it growing, adding records at the end. Another one is just the same, but we put the headers on the left, and we create a table that grows to the right, for example. Those 2 cases, here we bring them to the same structure, which is always columns and records down. There's another case, which is a table that grows into both directions. I am adding employees as columns and years as rows. in this case, we would propose the user to use the year as a column, okay, and use rows because that's what Tryton provides us. And there's a fourth case, which is a kind of configuration sections where I put the number of employees, the revenue of the last year, this kind of data that is stored, that is used in formulas, okay? So to distinguish between those cases, a table and configuration section, the user can choose to use either a sheet or a singleton. So what we are trying to do is to force the user to structure data correctly, okay? So it will scale better. When there are more data, it will, and more sheets using it, it will be better. It would be easier to manage it, okay? I'm going to leave the sheet by now. I'm going to jump the dataset field by now, and I'm going to show you to put here a first formula. I'm going to add a name. Let's make something very simple. As you see, this will be the columns. A column has a name, but also has an alias given by the system automatically. And I will tell it that it's a text with a single line. Note that we tried not to use, in some cases, the names of the fields that we would do in Tryton. This one, we would name it many-to-one. This would be a char. This would be a text. But we tried to give names that the end user will understand better. And so let's make something simple. Okay. So as usual, this document is in draft state, and then I activate it. And once activated, I can open it. And it created a table. We can put data in. Okay. Any amount of information we want. One of the problems we mentioned, however, is that users, when the amount of data grows, this kind of list is too easy to modify, so they will be uncomfortable with it. But in Tryton, we have something that I think is better than locking the cells, like in Excel we do. We've got the possibility of bringing this back to draft and saying that quick edition is disabled. And that what we'll do is that if I want to modify, it brings us to the form view. So I keep being able to edit, but there's no risk of a quick mistake corrupting data. Of course, there are formulas. I can put, for example, a warning. And even we loaded it with some default icons. Okay, so I could say that if quantity is larger than 10, we'll use the red icon. Otherwise, we're going to use the green one. Okay, and this is going to be an icon. Okay, I tried to store it, and it said that the formula is not valid. As you see, the system, that's because I made a mistake here. It's not semicolon, but it's a colon. And it shows me a green icon saying that the formula is correct. We are using a library called formulas, which is on my laptop. A Python library that already supports a large number of Excel formulas. Okay, you can check the documentation to see what's supported. Okay, So again, I talked at the beginning about the fact that we call it sheets to tell the user, okay, this is a kind of Excel, and we allow them to use the formulas they already have to make them feel more comfortable with it. And apart from an icon, we can also link to something in the system, which is part of the enrichment problems I mentioned to you before. Maybe you want to add a name, quantity, and warning to something that's already in the system. Okay? So what I do here is that I say that this field is going to be a link to Tryton, and it's going to be linked to sales. Okay? I can activate it again and open the sheet. Note a couple of things here, apart from the fact that, of course, we've got the field and we've got the icon. The data was kept in the system. That's why I didn't remove any of the fields that were already there. If I had removed some of the fields, I would get a warning saying, hey, you are about to remove some data. And the system, this is stored in a table in the database, as a table, as a PostgreSQL table. And it's copied the data into a new table whenever you make some of those changes. Okay? So you should be able, if there's no, because I did some tests. Okay, well, in this case, we've got the form view, but of course you can choose a sale here, etc. Okay? Another example would be to create a settings sheet that's going to be a singleton where I'm going to put a configuration parameter that's going to be an integer. In this case, because I said it's a singleton, instead of opening a list view, it opens directly a form view, just like we are used to in Tryton. Okay? So I would say these are 10 employees. And now I can move, because I know the alias here, I can move to the test one and add another field. Sorry. Draft. Which picks the value of the other sheet. And multiply it by the quantity, for example. This is going to be an integer. I activate and open. Okay? If I add new data, let me go back to the sheet and enable the quick addition. Okay, on change, it updates using the formula. It updates the value. Okay. No crashes so far. I'm pretty proud of it. Some other stuff we can do with it. One stupid one, but if you've got consultants, for example, in the company, you can tell them, you define the models we need, and you copy paste, and you've got the Tryton model. It's a very simple thing, but it's nice to have. And there's also the possibility of creating new views on this data. Okay. So I can create my chart. Sorry, chart. You can choose among the types of charts that Tryton provides. I can choose a column to group by, for example, name, and a value such as the quantity. Accept that. And I can use the open button to show the chart out of the data. And it's integrated with the dashboard module in Tryton. I don't know if everyone knows this module, but it allows users to define their own dashboard out of the available actions in the system. So here's my dashboard, which is empty by now, but I can go to preferences of the user and select my chart here. Okay. And I can create new sheets and add them to my dashboard. Okay. Of course, you could use this chart, or you can use one of the views that the system already creates, such as the form view or the list view that you already saw. Let's move to the last part, which is the data set. Okay? We saw how to create your own spreadsheets, similar to, or the same things that people use in Excel, but how to fetch data from Tryton and manipulate it. Okay? We saw just a link to Tryton. I create a field. This one is pretty interesting for me, because anyone that is using Excel to add data and say the boss asked the logistics department to record some extra information about the shipments that arrive. They will probably create an Excel, put the number of shipment, and add this extra information. For example, if the goods came correctly, came on time, or whatever information, it's not yet recorded in Tryton. But when they create this Excel, they create this column, they put a number which is not checked by anything. So they can put information that is wrong, and then you cannot match it with the information in Tryton, because the reference is not linked. So this is very interesting for me. There are some things that we could extend it. As you see, we already created a method for the formulas library. In fact, for example, this, apart from sheet value, there's the sheet values in plural, which brings data not from a singleton, like in this case, but from another sheet that has several records. And you can sum, you can make equal sum the data from this column from this other sheet. So what you say is perfectly possible, and that's the idea, to extend it to capture this kind of information. Okay. So there's this dataset feature here that allows us to get data from Tryton. Okay? The simple case, I could say that this data set is going to be of type sheet. It could be of type singleton, just like sheets. And I say that it's going to pick up the information from existing Tryton models. But as you see, data sets can take information from other data sources. We already implemented SQL and another sheet. You can take one sheet and create a new one which adds new columns to the data coming from another sheet. Of course, you can think of it picking data from Google Drive, picking data from another database, or whatever you want, okay? The case of SQL, the widget changes, and you can create select asterisk from another table. This comes from the experience with Baby. I don't know if you know a module we developed several years ago, which allows you to create dynamic tables from Tryton, which works more or less well, although the code needs to be updated. But the problem we have there is that you cannot join data from several sources. Say that you want not just a statistic of sales, or not just a statistic of purchases, but statistics of sales minus purchases per month. You cannot do this with Baby. But SQL allows you to join data. In other cases, you may want to use, for example, forward data wrappers. I don't know if everybody knows that PostgreSQL has features to create tables in the database that are not stored in the database, but are in another database. In Oracle, another PostgreSQL somewhere else, CSV file, whatever. Okay? So you could do that work on the back end on PostgreSQL and then use SQL to access this data, that it's in the same database where Tryton is hosted. But let's take the example of sale. Of the model. Should be possible to use an existing search to create a domain, add a context, or give data an order. And once I have this data set, I can choose it. From here, now you see that I've got an update formulas button. Click on it, and it loads the data from the data set. Okay, the field definition from the data set. Unfortunately, there are still some missing features with some field types, so I'm going to remove several of them because otherwise it's not going to load them correctly. Okay, it's basically linked to Tryton, and datetime it's not yet supported. It should be easy, but it's a to-do. It's in the to-do list. Okay, so to keep it simple, I'm going to just leave sale number, for example, and I don't know, total for it. So I activate it, and then it appears the compute button, because if I just open it right now, I don't have the data loaded yet. So I compute, and now I open, and I've got a sheet with all the data coming from the sales in the system. With it, of course, I could create new views. I already showed you the chart view, but you can create a table in which you just show a subset of the columns that you have in the sheet, or you can create a custom view in which you put your XML definition for a specific form or calendar if you want, or whatever kind of view you need. And there's in the future, to develop dynamic tables just like we have with Baby. And of course, you can add formulas to this data. Okay? Okay. Compute. That's it. Okay. As you see, I didn't mention, but the fact that we put the formula in the main definition as a column it takes out the problems of consistency of formulas in Excel. Because in Excel, you've got a formula per row, but users tend to be worried when you have 1,000 rows if the formula is the same in all of the rows. Okay? By giving just one definition of the formula that is going to be expanded to all the rows, you have confidence that information is okay, if there's not a bug, but we are not going to consider that case, okay? As you see, I'm closing the tab each time, opening it again, and columns are changed. This thanks to one of the features that Cedric mentioned before, new in 5.2, which is cache management, because we tell Tryton not to catch the view definition. So this is a great addition for this kind of feature. I think that's more or less all. If I missed something, probably I'm going to realize now that I'm going to continue. Is there anything else before I finish the slides? Any doubts? Any?
There was a question on the module of the state anywhere.
It will be probably today. We're going to publish it. Okay, it's going to be named Shine and be available in Nantic's Bitbucket. Nothing else here? Okay, so just a brief review of the points I mentioned and how we solved each of them, okay? The fact that data is too easy to modify, I already mentioned that it's possible to lock tables or making them not editable in tree view or list view. The problem with the formula, etc., the consistency of the formulas is solved by having on one side sheets logically with each of them separate with their own logic. This is a sheet, this is a singleton, etc., and one formula per column. The scalability problems, one sheet pointing to the other, that's why we added the alias, and that allows us to make things consistent even if you want to change the name. Also, the alias allows us to have a shorter name, so the formula is also shorter, because in many cases you will use a very large name for the sheet, and in Excel you will see in the formula this large name. And if in the name you put numbers and things like that, it's very difficult to check if the formula is correct. So using alias solves part of the problem. When you need to link between documents, that's why we brought all sheets at the same level and use tags and make no difference if they are in a document or another. This also allows users to share better. If there's a employee's definition, it can be shared by all the people in the company. Not everyone has to have their own sheets where they configure the number of employees. And of course, everything is in Tryton, so the sharing problem is completely removed. The fact that ODBC was complex to use and difficult to share, again, as everything is in Tryton, that's no longer a problem, and there's the model data source feature. Again, exporting each time is impractical. That's no longer a problem. We've got data sources that bring data in Tryton. And enriching data from the ERP and this consistency problem I already mentioned is also solved by allowing you to link to Tryton data. We also tried to learn some things from Baby and try not to add many more issues to the ones that we are trying to solve. One of them I already mentioned is using the term sheets, using Excel formulas that users already know, and of course reusing the Tryton environment that users also already know, so we don't make them change the environment. In Baby, what we did was also more or less the same, was using Tryton, so you avoid the integration of a new solution, of a business intelligence solution, which has an extra cost, an extra, again, making the computation of totals, etc. Or defining users, etc. You prevent all this user management. What things we still have to do? Of course, stabilization. There was a miracle today. There were no problems. But it needs fixing, of course. It's not in production yet, so it needs much more testing. One use case I didn't mention is, for example, when customers come from another system, they want to keep as many data as possible from the previous system. But we tend to tell them that sales, purchases, or invoices are not going to be migrated unless they pay a lot of money, because it costs a lot. And the reason is because Tryton has a structure usually that is different from the one of the customer. But with this tool, we can create a sheet, a new sheet in the system that stores the data from the previous system, sales and this kind of stuff, okay? And then we can create data sets that explode this data and even merge it with the data from Tryton, because people want to keep sales and this kind of information for analysis. So we can use this tool to keep also data from the previous system and store it safely in a normal PostgreSQL table. And it's important for us, I think for customers, but also for NatDig, because many of those things can be done by a consultant, not necessarily a developer. Okay? Some of the things, I continue, some of the things that can be done is this management, the fact that we can create dynamic tables that are user-defined, is not easily supported by Tryton. But we generalize it. It's part of the module, but it could be a new columns or whatever name we give it, a module that specializes on treating or creating dynamic models. Okay? We should be able to apply filters to data sets. We should be able to working with order. And now, currently, the data set or the data I showed you here, of course, I took it for granted, but you can search on it. So in Excel, you will usually also search on data. The typical use case that you choose the header, you click on it, and you apply filters, I think it's called, or something like that. And from there on, you can filter data. That's already brought to you by Tryton itself, okay? So we support that, but, and we, of course, you can sort it, and you've got the totals, because any integer or number field already has the totals by default. But this means that you cannot rearrange rows, okay? So what we envision is that it should be possible for the user to have a setting just like Quick Addition that allows you to choose either if you want a sequence field that will allow you to move rows up and down but will prevent you from sorting, or use this way of working in which you can sort, but then you cannot rearrange the stuff up and down. We should support some of the field types I mentioned that it's not working in data sets, and some other fields such as selection, many-to-one, etc. Implement user permissions. That's interesting because we can bring user permissions to the sheet level and decide which users can see which data. So accounting people can use those accounting sheets, etc. Tags could be much more used or better used if we created some hierarchy and decide that we have tags for defining type of document, another one for defining area of the company and things like that. And we could say this, the user must classify at least one tag in the area and one tag in the type of document. So we ensure that all data is properly classified. And this could even be something, a kind of mixing in core, because imagine that in products you have many categories, but you want to ensure that users put the kind of product or the target market and things like that. You could ensure that that is always introduced correctly. We already have a module for that in parties, for example, in party categories. We should implement dynamic tables, which is what Baby already provides. We could support context model. Imagine that the singleton sheets I mentioned with the employee, it was available on the top of the sheet as a context model. So you could change the parameters and it would change the formulas in the bottom without need to changing from one sheet to the other. We could also consider to support simple eval or Python expressions directly for power users. And we should test performance, which is also going to be something to analyze, and probably many more ideas that can come out of the talk. And that's it. Thank you for your attention. I don't know if you've got any questions, if you already love it or not. Thank you very much.
You briefly mentioned using BI tools. Have you considered using BI tools, and have you looked into it?
Instead of using this?
Yeah. Instead of creating this?
Yeah, of course, of creating this. Our experience with BI tools hasn't been very good. We are developing nowadays some dashboards and things like that, and we are using specific tools for that. There's Dash, there's some Python libraries, for example, that allow you to create beautiful dashboards. But we are not using it. I know some people that have experience with Power BI and things like that, but we prefer this kind of solution. Thank you.
The question I want to ask you is, the overview in user friendly and using that to introduce information that is supposed to be inside the Tryton and get out of control of the main workflows.
There's a risk of it. But they are already using it. They are already doing it with Excel. So I don't think there's a higher risk.
So easy. And so in so beautiful way and in the right way that maybe some users don't use Tryton framework, Tryton workbook, Tryton modules in order to use that kind of tool that finally becomes in a bad use of Tryton. Do you understand me?
Yeah, I think that it's a risk. The thing is that we found in some cases that people were going to use Excel anyway, and it made sense for them. Or they asked for things that's so specific that you start to questioning if it's really worth the development. So I think. not the cases in which we thought about it. In many cases, is companies in a specific sector, for example, that's not managed correctly, or an accounting department that it feels comfortable with Excel and they're going to use Excel, and there's a point in which you say, there's companies maybe in the, I don't know how it's spelled, food sector, and they will have their own profit and loss report, which introduces the average percentage of efficiency in productions and things like that. And each company has their own KPIs. And there's a point in which you say, I need some tool to allow them, or at least the consultant, to do something that more or less works. When we used Baby, that allows them to create dynamic tables, we always said this is not a complete business intelligence solution, but it's going most probably to allow you to analyze data for the months to come, and it's going to be enough. And this is this kind of solution that we saw that works well. We've got some customers that said, I've got some data in SQL Server and Baby works for us, and we just need to copy that information. We created the models for them, and they are analyzing data in Baby because it's enough. Sometimes you just need a tool to do that, not a perfect tool. So there are so many use cases for this. The idea, well, this came, I presented it coming from the Excel analysis, but it also came from the fact that we need to re-implement part of Baby because it's too messy. There were, at the point when we developed it, we choose how to manage dynamic models in a way that it's now much better to be done like this, because in that case we created models. If you search in the model list of Tryton, you see Baby models. Now not. We don't do that. We do other techniques to emulate that. When we developed that, PostgreSQL didn't have grouping sets, which is an SQL extension that allows you to compute all the tree and aggregated data in one SQL query. There are several features that need to be re-implemented. So that's why we also put dynamic tables here, or the concept of dynamic table, we're thinking about it, but we also need to think about how sheets relate to each other, and we don't make a mess of the way users need to recompute information in order to end up having this dynamic table. It's a little bit complex. There's nothing to be ashamed about it.
I programmed in this, I think one of the appeals of Excel for this kind of use in businesses is the visual feeling you got from the 2D grid of the table.
Mm-hmm.
So when you put the formula in a cell, you see where the cell fits in the whole picture. So yeah, like I said, not quite a question, but when I look at your solution, I like really the concept of it. The rules it enforces, they are very good, and it's much better than in Excel, and it provides the simplicity of putting some formula for a layman, not programmer. For a layman, you can put some formula and it calculates for him the result. What I'm missing is this visual idea or the visual view of the 2D grid.
Mm-hmm.
Is it something, because you said
I,
some kind of
I agree, this is exactly the case. But at the same time, this is one of the advantages of Excel, but it's also one of the keys of its problems in the future. The fact that we have everything there and it's not structured. So again, it's a compromise. I know, of course, this is not going to be Excel. We cannot put bold font here, change the font there. So there's a lot of missing features and it's not going to be there. But it's also not an ERP system in which you need a developer. So you need to know that you are in a compromise between one thing and the other. And I think that's something that the users wanting to use it need to understand. I also took a look what other things were in the market. I found a product that is named Coda, in which they say that it's a kind of Word document like an application, or develop applications like Word documents, CODA. And one of the things I found was that, for example, in tables, they allow you to create it. It's like a Word document or a Google Doc document, and they allow you to create tables. And for formulas, they do the exact same thing. Of course, it's a much better graphical interface because they are not subject to a framework like we do. But what they do is that when you put a formula in one of the columns, it automatically applies to all the columns. You cannot say this row has this formula and this other row has this other formula. So in a way, it shows us that this is the right solution for this kind of problem. What I was successful today is that everybody's congratulating me because I said you're going to love it, so you feel forced to say it, so thank you. Sorry?
You pay the bill.
I'm paying the bills. Okay, don't say it again.
One of the main mistakes that I've seen of Excel is making not tables. I had the impression that people are using Excel almost exclusively to pivot tables. And
That's what we call dynamic tables here. It's pivot tables. So it's not basically it's not implemented yet, but that's the idea. Would be the next step. It's what you did with Heavy. Heavy was its name, the library. Heavy.
Is it possible to import data from Excel?
It should be a data set. No. If it's for importing, we are going to prevent exporting to Excel, but importing is okay. The idea is, yes, to have a data set type, which would be Excel here, or it could be Google Drive, and you put the link of Google Drive and pick the data from there. Things like that should be possible, yes.
You can use the CSV from the client.
Of course, there's nothing better than Excel. But it could be maybe starting of a solution. So right now, I have a student in my company, and she is now writing her thesis for diploma about accounting in Tryton. So proper accounting, so finance, governance, office is specified as well. And the second part would be to define business performance indicators, because I think each company is equal which business it has business performance indicators which are very similar to each other. And I think it could be a next big step to have Tryton something like balance scorecard with typical business performance indicators.
Mhm.
So you always have, for instance, turnover per employee or something like that. project what we do together, I think, and we share. So we define the business performance indicators and we put it into a module and release it.
Mhm. What,
Like example sheets or
what we have regarding accounting is that we developed, well, in fact, it came from OpenERP, from a Spanish company, and then we migrated it to Tryton. We've got this account financial statement report. Hopefully, it will work. This is how we take. We show our users profit and loss reports and balance reports in Tryton. In fact, this is not the last version. We need to merge a change we did some time ago, but you're going to get, I think, a little bit the idea. This is one of the inputs to end up creating Shine. Here, what users can do with accounting reports is creating their own financial reports in a very rigid, quite rigid structure, but at the same time they have some configuration options. Let me show you. Where's the menu entry, templates, financial statement? Okay, we already provide them the Spanish financial statements. Okay, balance and profit and loss. This would be one of the profit and loss. This official document, and here they define the formulas. These are account numbers, and the system splits this and says, okay, if the account starts with 700, we are going to put here the balance. And then you create here the report somewhere. Where is the reporting stuff? Here. Financial statement. They create the report because it allows them to store it, okay? It would be profit and loss I choose one of the templates, okay? Profit and loss 2019. I could choose one of the periods of the fiscal periods, and I can compare it to another period. You can just compare two periods. With? No. Yes, there's a module that extends it with analytic. It adds here the analytic account you want to see. And I've computed it, and you can see the result here, which is, well, it's not so bad. You didn't lose money here. And there's a PDF report in, okay? That's it. We made an improvement over this, which allows users to, instead of this syntax, use a more flexible syntax. So they can put, okay, I want the balance, but I also want to put a fixed number. So it looked more similar to Excel or something like this, okay? But at the same time, this was limited for only 2 periods, and some users want to see several periods and things like that. So we've also had this input that whatever you did, it was better to have this than have something hard-coded, but it's never too flexible or not flexible enough. So I think this brings to the point of you mentioned, the KPIs and
What I think the general thing I don't like in Tryton is when you have numbers and you get an export and you don't get an Excel export, but you get a Word export. I think
a word.
a Word, like, this is terrible. You know, if I want to have numbers, I don't want to have a sheet like a worksheet. I want to have an Excel sheet out of it because I take it and
Well, you can export.
more.
In this case, you can export data. What we tell users that they can go here.
Now it looks again not like that one.
No, you can create a PDF report, but then as data is computed and stored, this is stored, you can use standard Tryton export here and take the computed data from here.
And does the export looks the same like this, or is it different?
Like this. You will make me lines. Thank you. Previous value is the first one.
So this is the normal export. What I
Yeah.
think is when you can do an export, it comes out in Excel, it is formatted, so like red, yellow, green, what you need, and you can work with it further.
So you want to add the colors? Did I understand correctly, for example?
So the normal export is actually like this CS.
Mhm.
What I mean is that you can get it out with a real Excel or
Okay, yeah.
Office Excel that you have like your format right away, you know.
Mhm.
For me, I can't work with that. I can take it and I can work on it. But the normal designer or business user cannot do it or don't want to do it.
Mhm.
It's more comfortable when it's more formatted. Yeah, of course. But this is the really workful work, you know, because people see it and say, yeah, this is great. When you see this, it's like, okay, I have to do that work now.
Nothing else? Thank you then.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Now we have our last topic for today. It is the foundation of supporter meeting. It's in the schedule.